What is good, everyone? Welcome to the channel. Today is going to be a rather informal vlog again. I'm driving, I'm on the road, so you'll be able to watch some scenery go by, and I'm going to talk about what it's like to work in a Japanese university. I did a video 2 weeks ago about daily routine, and I sort of ended that video after talking about the morning routine and getting to work. And so now today I'm going to talk about actually what it's like to be in my place of employment and what being at a Japanese university is generally like. So if you're interested in that, please stick around and let's get started. Okay, before I get started, please clink glasses with the like button and say "Kanpai!" Cheers! And please pour a fresh beer for the subscribe button. They will both appreciate it greatly. Thanks for tuning in. Let's get started. Okay, when you first arrive at a university in Japan, now obviously not every university is exactly the same, but there are some certain features that are pretty common. These are things that I've discovered because I've visited a lot of universities in Japan. I've worked at a number, but also because I've gone to a number of other universities for conferences or to visit colleagues or to go to like a study session. Any number of things can be a reason to go to different universities all around, well, the Kanto area where I live, and also, conferences out in Kyoto and Osaka and way out in Hiroshima, wherever. And when you arrive at universities, you will often find that there is kind of a security station or like a little kiosk or a window where there is a security guard, or what they call a Gadoman here in Japan, or guardman. So these Gadoman, I don't really get the sense that they're much about security really, although they do take note of who enters and who leaves campus, and I think they probably will, report any kind of suspicious behavior or people. But for the most part, they are more like custodians. They hand out keys to people who need them for offices or buildings. They give directions to delivery trucks who want to find Building 5, and so they direct them how to get to Building 5. I have had to sign in before. For example, if I've had an interview at a college campus, the guardman I'll be told I'm supposed to sign in at the guard gate, and then they'll give me directions on where I need to go. They patrol the campus, and like I said, they're kind of like a custodian, so they'll do things like pick up bikes that have been blown over in the wind, and they might, they always check windows and doors late at night to make sure that everything is locked and secure. And yeah, they're custodians with, I guess, kind of a security job. And they're usually at main entrances, but if there's like a lot of side entrances to campuses, they don't typically have a guardman at each entrance. And some campuses don't have them at all. And some campuses you can see the guardman house, but they don't actually employ any anymore. So that's a pretty typical feature of a campus when you first arrive. And they wear uniforms like a security guard. They've got like the police-esque uniform on. We've got quite a bit of traffic here this evening, so you'll get to see some interesting scenery, but a lot of red taillights as well. You get a good impression of what traffic can really be like in Japan, even in the countryside where I am currently. We are not in Yokohama at the moment. So next, you get onto campus, and of course, campuses come in all shapes and sizes, and universities here can be as small as a couple of thousand students. they can be as large as tens of thousands of students, depending. A lot of the campuses in Tokyo are going to be really self-contained because they can't get a lot of land. And some campuses are actually a single building. Like, it's almost like an office building, but it's just the campus of whatever university. If you've ever been to Yokohama National University, you'll be surprised at how spacious it is and how wild and jungle-like the grounds are. I learned that it was actually built on a old golf course, and so you can kind of get that impression. There's a lot of old trees, and it's very hilly, and it's basically just too much wild grass and jungle for the groundskeepers to really keep up with it. So I don't go there very much. I used to go there for some special class sessions that I went to a few years ago, but it's an easy campus to get lost on, that's for sure. But actual campus life, I mean, students, if it's Yokohama area, Tokyo area, they're pretty much commuter colleges. There are some dorm life situations, but for the most part, students will live in apartments close to the campus, or they live at home and commute from home. Some campuses, I guess, might allow students to have cars and drive, but I think that's really rare. I don't currently work at any place that allows students to drive, and even most faculty don't drive. There's limited parking at most campuses, and in Yokohama and Tokyo area, the public transportation is so good you don't really need to take a car to work. I do because of social distancing and Corona, but if Corona weren't going on, I would be taking public transportation with everyone else. The class sizes, so if we're getting into the details of university work, again, that'll depend on the university and what types of classes you're teaching. If you're teaching a required course, you can have anywhere from 40 to 80 to even over 100 students in a lecture. I once had a 100 student lecture class that was entitled English Communication. So I guess I was supposed to be teaching speaking to over 100 students, which is a pretty ridiculous, impossible situation to get that many students like speaking to each other. But it can happen. Some classes can be as small as less than 10 if it's an elective. And classrooms themselves will really vary. You'll find often that private schools have more money to spend on like audiovisual equipment and having nicer desks and better equipment in general for educators in the classroom. Public schools funded by public money tend to be really tight with their budgets, so they don't spend a lot of money on fancy stuff. There's exceptions, of course. I mean, certain departments in public universities will have better funding, and not every private university is rich, so again, every situation is a bit different. Classes tend to be 70 to 90 minutes, much longer than classes in junior high school or high schools. Most of the places I worked were 90-minute classes, usually with a 10-minute or 15-minute passing time between classes. 90 minutes is a long time to sit and deal with a foreign language. When I was in university, it was usually the case that if you took a Monday, Wednesday, Friday class, they were an hour long, and a Tuesday, Thursday class would be an hour and a half long, so you ended up with 3 hours a week either way. Not so in Japan. It can be all variety of combinations. You can have one class a week for 90 minutes. You can have 3 classes a week, all 90 minutes. It depends on the course and requirements, etc. But the 90-minute rule, sometimes 80, sometimes 70 at different universities, class times seem to be pretty ironclad. Like the whole university, no matter what class it is, will be doing 90 minutes or 70 minutes. The students themselves, in terms of like how they are in the classes, it depends, but by and large, Japanese students will be more passive in the classroom. They ask less questions and give less reaction to instruction. So you really have to scaffold well, and you have to be willing to accept that you're not going to get a lot of questions. So for me, that means being very proactive. I have to really anticipate and do better with what I might not be explaining clearly, and basically I have to be much better with my explanations and teaching style, because I can't assume that questions are going to help fill any gaps. This is actually changing though. I found that over the years, the classes have become less passive. I feel like students coming out of high school now are becoming more and more active in the classrooms. I don't really necessarily have any theories as to why that might be, but it's something I've personally observed, that in the most recent years, my students are much more proactive in class than when I first started teaching in 2009. So over the past 11 years, yeah, it's changed. It was actually one good thing about Zoom was students were asking questions in Zoom classes. So the online classes, I would get questions because they could send private messages to me on the chat function. And so many students were more willing to ask a question to me in private than, raise their hand in front of the entire class and ask their question. So again, it's not because they don't have questions, it's because they're a little bit more shy to ask them. Some basic things that Japan has been slow to adopt at the universities, like I'm working at 3 different schools right now, and every single one of them had really rather limited Wi-Fi and basically connectability on their campuses before the coronavirus. Now everyone's up to speed because they had to, but like IT tends to be quite behind the States, I guess. I mean, I came out of grad school where everyone was sitting in classes with laptops, came to Japan and started teaching at Japanese university, and like students would show up to class without even a notebook. I mean, so certainly not using laptops or other devices. That has also changed though, especially accelerated by Corona. Some things that were taken for granted in classrooms in America, like document cameras, the cameras that you can set up over a document and it will project that document onto the screen. Like, I've yet to work in a Japanese classroom that just had it standard. My professors in the US were giving quizzes and tests online as homework, and that was something we weren't even set up and capable to do at a lot of the schools where I was, so it just wasn't part of the curriculum. Let's see. In terms of my work as an English teacher, I'm associating mostly with students and other English teaching faculty. I don't have a lot of direct contact with a lot of the other staff of the university, and as a result, in many ways, my Japanese ability has plateaued because of that, because I use English as my primary mode of communication day in and day out, because when I'm with students, they're practicing their English with me. When I'm speaking to the other English teachers, I'm using English with them. And I really only use Japanese when I go to file paperwork with personnel, or I have to reserve equipment to use in the classroom, and I'm dealing with staff for that. So it's one of my regrets about kind of the type of teaching situations I find myself in that I don't get to use much Japanese and don't get much Japanese practice, actually. The number of classes I teach, well, that can really vary from semester to semester. But if you're doing typical contract work full-time, you're going to be teaching 8 to 10 classes, sometimes more. If you're stringing together part-time work, you're maybe stringing together as many as 15 to 20 classes. I'm currently teaching part-time in addition to some full-time, so I've got quite a number of classes during the week. If you get to the point where you actually land one of those tenure track genuine professor jobs, you will have, generally the standard is 6 classes a week. And so you're like, okay, the higher up the ladder you get, the less classes you're teaching. If you're teaching part-time, you're teaching 15 to 20. If you're teaching full-time, you've got like 8 to 12. And now you're a professor, so you work the least? Not exactly. If you're in the professor position, it's like the rest of the world where you're expected to be doing research and publishing. That's another kind of issue with a lot of the English teaching contract jobs at universities. You're not really expected to be a researcher, although I do a lot of research because I'm interested in it, and a lot of my colleagues do research, but I do have a number of colleagues that just show up, teach, don't bother with research. I do have a lot of colleagues that just show up, teach, don't bother with research, and it is what it is. They're fine with that, and they're happy to be doing just their contract work, and that's what they're going to continue. I myself am hoping to get into some kind of tenure track position at some point, teach less classes, do more research, do more classes in linguistics rather than just English teaching. That is a goal of mine for sure. As it is, if you're in a contract position, they're going to vary in terms of like support from the school. Some schools don't think of you as researchers at all, so they don't give you much in the way of monetary support. They don't give you research funds or much in the way like that. Other schools are generous, and they just give you like a few $1,000s a year and say, here's your research funds. Just save your receipts and make your claims on how you're using the money. I've been in both good situations and bad when it comes to that. Situations where I had decent research funds to use, and other situations where I was given essentially nothing. Of course, you can always apply for research. Research grants, that kind of thing. And that's a good thing to do, because if you get grants, that looks good on your resume if you're looking for jobs in the future. So if you get to be a real professor with 6 classes, you're going to be expected to be publishing and researching. It's not quite the same publish or perish rat race that is the case in the States, but definitely if you want to have any kind of career advancement and, better salary and better benefits, if you want to move up the hierarchy, you do want to publish for sure. There are some really good professional groups in Japan that you can join, associations where you can present your research and publish in their journals. Universities tend to have their own in-house journal, although they typically publish anything that a professor or teacher who works there will publish. Like, I have publications in my university's in-house journal, but because they basically publish anyone who works there without much editing or review, those publications don't really count very much towards your career, because they're easy, anyone can do them, sort of thing. So you do have to try to get published in peer-reviewed international journals if you want to advance that way. But if all you want to do is teach in Japanese university and forget about the research, there are plenty of jobs out there that are fine with you being just a teacher. Offices can be shared, they can be private. If you're a professor, you'll have a private office. If you are in an English teaching center, you might have 2 or even 3 people to an office. Sometimes you might have your own office to yourself. Again, depends on the situation. And you'll have office hours where you're expected to meet with students, be available for students, and take student questions. Or it might even be like a conversation hour where students can sign up and have like English conversation practice with various teachers at different times during the week. I've done all of those things. Scheduled appointments with students for writing practice, or just a free for all. Anyone can come and join in whatever crazy conversation we happen to be having. The caliber of student can really be widely variant. I have taught students at university who we would call false beginners, who basically have been taking English since junior high school or even elementary school, but never took English very seriously or didn't study very hard, and their English level is basically still beginner level after all these years. Those universities that have very low-level students are not that uncommon. And I've also taught English majors who all they think about is studying English, and they are really gung-ho and really serious about their English study, and are coming at it with a really great attitude and have really very premier English skills that you could see them having a pretty successful career even if they decided to go abroad. So you're going to get both. Generally speaking, if you work at a public university, you're going to get slightly higher level students because public universities are cheaper and therefore get a lot more competition for spots. More competition means that the universities can be more selective and get better students, and so you get stronger students in general. So if you teach at a public university, you'll generally find the English level to be higher. Of course, there's famous private universities where the student level is very high, so there are exceptions to the rule, but I would say a lot of the private university teachers, a lot of the private university schools, especially if it's not a famous school per se, you will find that the student English level is lower, even if they're pretty proficient at other topics. Like English is one of those subjects that can really drop by the wayside for students who are just not interested in foreign language at all. And, frankly, I don't knock them for it. I don't think foreign language necessarily needs to be for everyone. And, I help them get through those required classes, get as much out of them as I possibly can. But, I'm not going to try to force them to like English if they haven't liked it up to this point. I just do my best and hope they get something out of the class and a little bit of enjoyment from my weird zaniness in the classroom. Alright, I think this video again is getting a little bit long. I've talked about kind of the basics of university teaching life. It's more than a 9-to-5 job. I mean, I get to work usually before 8:30 and I usually leave after 5, so an hour for lunch. It's not easy. It's class preparation, teaching classes, and then I'm throwing research on top of that. Plus, I gotta edit these YouTube videos from time to time, so I'm pretty busy. I want to thank you for watching this YouTube video, and I hope to catch you on the next one. I put out a new video every single Friday about Japan, society, life, and culture, so please look for my past content and my future work. If you haven't said kanpai, cheers, to the like button yet, and if you haven't poured a drink for the subscribe button yet, please do so now. You've made it this far in the video. Thanks again for watching, and I will catch you next week.